Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to another special podcast with Father Christopher, who's come all the way from the Vatican. That's right. Now, we're going to talk about his likes, his dislikes, and what he absolutely hates on pizza, which I totally disagree with. You'll see that entire banter, it's unedited, I promise. However, most importantly, we talk about Lady Zaynab. Father Christopher has actually written the book on Lady Zaynab's life. He's done extensive research on this noble lady. Naturally, I had a lot of questions to ask him. So you know what? I'm going to stop talking and let's get straight to it. I hope you enjoy it.
When you go to a local pizza place here and you come home with a pineapple and ham pizza, that would give most Italians the urge to jump off a building, really. I can say unashamedly, I love Lady Zaynab. And I started researching her life by accident. Lady Zaynab at that moment becomes the woman she was born to be.
Could you tell me where she's buried? Because
No,
I think
can't.
this... Oh, see, I knew you were going to do that.
Once you've lived in Italy, there's certain things you don't do. You don't eat cheap pasta. You go and get real stuff. Preferably you go and find an old lady making it and you say, can I buy some from you?
It has to be really good tasting pasta.
It has to be good pasta.
It needs good, for me, spices. Obviously, you can tell that I'm a man who likes a bit of spice.
So you want what the Italians call ragu.
Ragu.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is, it can be as spicy as you want.
We can add more ragu on it.
You could add, but you can add to pasta, you can't add to pizza. So the trouble with pizzas outside Italy is they're
Did you say pizza?
Pizza.
Oh, have I been saying it wrong in my entire life?
Why? What have you been saying?
Pizza?
Well, that's pretty much
Is it okay? Pizza.
The Italians
Pizza.
have lots
Pizza.
of double letters, which we don't handle well in English. Because we don't have that many double, but in Italian there are lots of double, like pizza is a double, and they stress the double letter.
See, I captured that when you said it. I was
pizza.
like, what are you talking about? Is this a new...
No, it's a new brand. The trouble with pizza outside of Italy is it's too thick, the crust,
Yes.
and there's too much topping. Too much. You don't want to be piling stuff on a pizza. So the crust should be paper thin, literally.
Right.
And slightly burnt around the edges.
Yeah, that's diet food here. Like when you're on a diet, you're not going to have the normal, what we call normal pizza.
So what you eat here is what we would call Neapolitan pizza. The pizza up in Naples has a thicker crust, but not everyone likes it. If you're in Rome, you eat Roman pizza, which is paper thin crust and good topping, but not too much. Don't what people call busy. Italians don't like busy food. Don't make it busy.
Right.
Make it simple, because otherwise you lose flavors.
Right.
So, you want to keep your flavors. So when you go to a local pizza place here and you come home with a pineapple and ham pizza, that would give most Italians the urge to jump off a building, really. They just say, what are you doing? Pineapple on a pizza? You can't do that.
So what goes on a real pizza?
So lots of cheese. And in Italy, there are lots of different types of cheese. So certainly cheese. Certain types of ham, prosciutto, whatever type of ham you want.
The spinach?
Not really. Spinach. No? Why would you want to put spinach? Spinach should be banned. I mean, you shouldn't be even eating spinach. It tastes
really nice.
No, it doesn't. No.
That's really healthy for you as well. Not on pizza.
Do I look unhealthy?
No, of course not.
I've never eaten spinach in my life, so this just proves a point.
All right. Wow.
But no,
not a fan of Popeyes either.
Not really. Not on pizza, but certainly you can have vegetarian pizza. You can have pizza with various types of salami or meat. You can have, and now they are branching out a little bit, but keep it simple. In other words, you don't want too many ingredients on top of you, otherwise the flavors clash.
Okay, I get that.
But don't make your base too thick, because otherwise you just, it's like hacking your way through.
So, for example, if I was to go to Italy and order a pizza with doner meat, that would be haram in Italy, wouldn't it?
With what?
Doner meat.
Oh, doner kebab, that sort of meat.
Like a doner kebab on top of a pizza as a topping.
No, I mean, you could ask for a particular type of meat.
Okay.
It's very interesting in Italy because we often at our college have Muslim guests.
Okay.
And we don't know what to do about feeding them because we like to take people out to restaurants. That's quite a big thing with us. But you have to find restaurants in Rome that serve halal. And
Right.
more and more, there are restaurants that we phone and they say, yes, we do halal. You don't have to worry about that.
Nice.
So, because that's been an issue in Italy. They kind of, as I said to you, they're quite fussy about food. They haven't come close to the issue of haram and halal yet. They're still busy with, what are you putting mayonnaise on that for? It's still...
Well, it's good to know there's options available, because if I do ever come to visit you, I'm not going to starve.
You have to come. No, we've got places that we go
Because
to.
you don't have spinach either, so I can't even do vegetarian
No,
options.
you can eat as much spinach in Italy as you like, but just don't ask me to provide it or to cook it. Because I'm not gonna-
Is it the smell? Is it the taste?
No,
What
I,
is it
just,
that you
I don't like vegetables.
Oh, how are you so healthy without vegetables?
Because vegetables should be eaten raw. If you're going to eat carrots or peas, eat them raw. Don't cook them. And the fewer the better. Just eat well, but I've never believed in the whole, you've got to eat, 5 of something every day. I can barely get to 3.
I don't know who came up with that.
No, I don't either,
but some was the governments ran with it for a number of years, and we too have to follow.
Whatever
suit.
you eat now, it always says one of your 5. You could eat a pack of Pringles
Pizza.
and it says one of your 5.
So what is your favorite food then? What is it that you prefer? Really,
I-
really like to
I
eat?
love
Guys,
Italian
make a
food.
note of this, by the way,
No,
because we have
actually,
lunch coming up
I
soon.
love Italian food. I love Chinese food. I think Chinese food is great. It's
Oh.
healthy, and it's
Is there a lot of Chinese food in Italy?
huge numbers.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, because the Italians also like a break from Italian.
Of course.
And they incline to avoid the fast food chains, except the kids. The kids go to the fast food
Sure,
chains.
sure.
But the adults are saying, no, we want something. And Chinese is a big thing, a big option. So is Indian food. Indian restaurants in...
Coming up.
Yeah, I've got one around the corner from me, and I can smell, in the evenings, I can smell these beautiful... Oh, it's great.
Yeah, the spices and the aroma is amazing. So what's your favorite Indian food then?
I don't eat... It's too spicy for me.
No, but you could ask them to tweak it.
I know, but
Mild.
and then they give you a really dirty look. They say, "Why do you even bother coming here if you want to?"
Similar to how the Italians say, what's this ketchup?
Yeah,
What's this
I know.
mayo business? I get it.
Have you
I
got
get it.
anything non-spicy? And then they say, "No, this is an Indian restaurant. Of course, we don't have anything
You
non-spicy."
go next door
Go
to
next door.
McDonald's. I don't know.
to the Turkish restaurant.
Hey, Turkish food is good.
I know. No. I spend my life on the Edgware Road hunting down restaurants, and I ate Afghanistani food not so long ago. Beautiful food.
Kabuli pulao
I can't remember.
and the big round disc like chapli.
Yeah,
Chapli
lovely.
kebab.
Wonderful.
Oh, it's amazing. Oh yeah.
Iranian
I know what I'm
food. Let
getting
me
tonight.
tell you, Iranian food. I love Iranian food. Iranians just
That's the only white rice I will eat.
beautiful.
I'm bad with white rice, but their white rice. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Oh, wait,
So-
can we stop talking about food now?
Yes, we certainly can. But
Let's go
you
on to
can tell that's
something-
one of my favorite topics. But yes, let's get to the prominent personalities. Okay, so I've heard you online speak of this woman. I've listened to you, and when you speak about her, you are yourself in awe.
Yeah.
Okay, you speak very highly of her, and of course, she's one of the most dignified. Of course, she's left a legacy and a half, right? If we think Imam Hussein's left something, I think he really definitely needed his sister Zainab alongside, and I'm going to obviously be picking your brains on that as well. What I'm really curious to know about is the chronological order, the sequence of events that took place, because I think that Bibi Zainab, Lady Zaynab alayhi salam, she really shined when she were at peril, when she was in those conditions, and I really want to know what happened step by step, sort of from Karbala. She witnessed, endured, moved on, how she handled. She was a leader, because our fourth Imam, Imam Zain al-Abidin, peace be upon him, was not capable of handling the situation because of his illness or what have you, etc. So she became that leader of the pack. Having witnessed what she just witnessed, you wouldn't wish that on your enemy, right? So what can you tell me about her, how she rose to the occasion, in for lack of a better term, and just handled it so well?
So I can say,
Sorry about that.
it was like the ring again.
It was the ring.
I can say unashamedly, I love Lady Zaynab, and I started researching her life by accident. It was a joke, actually.
Oh.
4 Catholic priests sitting around a table complaining about Muslims and saying, why don't they write any books about the woman?
Right.
You know, there's no book about Lady Khadija. No biography exists. And I'd already produced something on Lady Fatima. So we said, okay, each of us is going to take a female personality in Islam and write a book. they were joking. I thought they were serious. So I began working on the life of Lady Zaynab.
So they said yes to you.
They
They're
said,
like,
yes, we're all going to do
Chris,
this.
Go for it.
No, they said, we're all going to do this. And I said, okay, I'm taking Zainab because I've come across her reading the life of Lady Fatima. I'm going to write about Zainab because nobody else has really written much about her. You guys can take who you want. This was a big joke to them. And 2 years later, I came to the table with this beautiful book. And I said, they said, what's this? I said, it's the book we all agreed to write.
Remember that one night?
We said we were joking. We weren't serious. So anyway, I'm delighted because I produced a book about a woman who I am fascinated by. She's an extraordinary personality. And I think a number of things. Number one, I think the most important thing for me about Lady Zaynab is her psychological development.
Okay.
Now, we'll come back to that in a moment.
Sure.
Because there's a definite change in her as the days pass. And the second thing is that I think Lady Zaynab was born for Karbala. That was her moment. We don't actually have that much information about her early life. We have elements that we know that her brothers loved her, that they wouldn't let her walk out alone. They would always go with her, with a lantern. We know that Ali was impressed by her Quranic recitation. He was impressed by her memorization of tafsir and even maybe fiqh, that he got her teaching some of the women of Medina.
Sure.
We know all of this. We know
Sure.
all of this.
Sure.
But that's quite a little for a long life. You say, well, there must have been more. The trouble is, when you're talking about this length of time, you're dealing with characters who don't have as much biography as they should have in the text. So when I started writing on Lady Zaynab, all my Shia friends said, oh, you're going to struggle, where are you going to find the resources? Well, I did find sources, but with great difficulty. You really have to dig. And every kind of tiny thing I found, I would go into it. And I was able to produce what I think is a fragmented biography. But that doesn't matter because I also think that she's created for Karbala. That is when, if you like to use Shariatis, that's when Zainab becomes Zainab.
Right.
So now join the two together, her psychology and that idea. So she leaves for Karbala with her brother and the companions, all of them together.
Sure.
Her husband doesn't go with her. He stays at home and looks after two of the children, and two of her children, at least two we think were her children.
Oh? There's some discrepancy there?
There is. I'll tell you why.
Okay.
It's because they're not named. So in all of the lists of martyrs, the martyrs are given, and they're always given as the sons of.
Sure.
But these two, the one is Aun and the one is Muhammad, in some of the martyrologies, they're given a different mother. Now, there might well have been more than one Aun and more than one Muhammad, but we presume that she had at least 4 sons. 2 of them stayed home with her father, and 2 of them accompanied her to Karbala and died on the field. Okay, so I'm not convinced that Lady Zaynab knew that this was the end. I think she knew absolutely that her brother was going to be martyred. I think
Sure.
she knew that.
Sure.
I'm not convinced she knew that this was the moment. I think the realization dawns on her over a period of days. And I come to this conclusion by reading the texts about her change in personality. So when they set out, there's a first moment where they have stopped at a particular place en route to Karbala. And she hears this voice reciting a lament, which traumatizes her. She breaks down. She's really traumatized. She goes to her brother and says, what is this? And he has to calm her down. And it's a lament which isn't nearly as dramatic as the one she's going to hear later on. But it's the beginnings of her understanding that something bad is going to happen.
So once she left her husband. That in itself is a little bit strange because especially back in the day, I mean, you would expect the man to go and leave the woman to handle the affairs of the home, etc. And this is back in the day, obviously. We're talking really 400 years ago. But the opposite takes place here.
It's quite controversial because some people think that he wasn't as convinced as she was about Hussein's cause. Some people.
Right.
Other people, I read at least one author who I tackled who said she divorced him or he divorced her.
Oh, wow. I never heard of that.
Well, he said that, but he used the Arabic word which could mean divorce, but it could also mean when a woman leaves her home for a period of time.
Sure.
So why would you go with there's no evidence that he divorced her.
Sure.
There is a possibility that he was one of those who tried to persuade Hussein not to go. Because there were people, including Salama, who said, please don't do this. And for good reason. And he could have been one of those. But we know that there was no break in the marriage, but that 2 of the children stayed with him and 2 accompanied their mother. She was just adamant.
She had 4.
It seems that there were 4
Okay.
at least. Again, numbers of children can be very problematic.
Sure.
Because sometimes one child has the same name, or one child has 3 different names, and you think, oh, well, I'm not sure which child this is now. Like Sukaina and Sakina, you have to differentiate them
can be very
very,
difficult.
very carefully.
Bro, thank you so much.
And thank
Father
you.
Christopher, that's yours.
That's lovely.
Yeah,
Thank
do
you.
you want to take a sip to see if it's okay?
I'm sure it's okay.
while the
I'm
man's
sure it's
here.
made with love.
Oh yeah, that's a big dash of love.
Look,
they put
it's
in there.
tea and it's green, therefore it must be green tea.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I, again, a lot of this stuff is my own kind of conclusions from reading the text. So she accompanies her brother because she's absolutely determined to go with him. Nothing's going to stop her. Even if he tried to persuade her not to, she would have gone with him. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
And that's because I think it was foreordained. She was meant to be there. I think a whole lot of things were meant to happen, and you were not going to get out of them. And we'll see that now.
Sure.
So she has this first moment where she hears a voice singing on the air some poem, some lament, and it upsets her. And she goes to her brother and says, what does this mean? And he calms her down and explains to her that they're on this journey. But you pick up that psychologically she's beginning to awaken to the fact that this is something quite grave.
Yes. Yes.
Then on the night before Karbala, Hussain is sitting with his legs tucked up in his seat, on his chair,
Sure.
outside his tent, some people say he was cleaning his sword. Actually, he wasn't. He was sleeping. Because he has a dream, and he has a dream of his grandfather,
Right.
who says, you are coming to us.
When you say day before Karbala,
This is
what
the
do you mean,
night.
Ashura?
The night
The
before.
ninth.
The
So
night,
day before
yeah,
Ashura.
yeah, the night of the 9th.
Eve. Okay.
So he's sitting outside his tent, ostensibly preparing his sword for battle, the texts say, but in fact he dozes off. And he has this dream of his father. His grandfather, who basically says, you are coming to join us.
Sure.
And when he relates this dream, he wakes up and relates to her, Lady Zaynab. She breaks down. She's absolutely horrified. She said, I've lost my mother, I've lost my father, I've lost my brother. Now I'm going to lose you as well. She's distraught by this. So I don't like this picture of this heroic woman who doesn't have emotion. That's a terrible picture. She was a real woman who had real emotions that any wife or mother would have.
But she overcame them, and that's what
Well,
we
okay, so
we
that's the
forget.
point. That's the point.
Yes.
That there's going to come a moment.
Yeah.
So, but I like to trace this growing trauma as the days arrive.
Sure.
Then Hussain recites this lament about time, how time is such an enemy, and that by this time tomorrow so many people will be dead, and she breaks down again. And Zain al-Abidin, who is ill, has to comfort her. She's looking after him. He then has to comfort her.
Wow.
So on the night of the battle, you have a woman who is traumatized and panicky and anxious. The next mention of Lady Zaynab in the Sunni text is that she walked out of her tent in the middle of the battle after the death of Ali al-Aqba, and she looked like the sun rising. That's what Ibn Sa'd says. She looked like the sun rising.
So is that when she kind of
So-
acknowledged and took upon that role?
That means for me that there's been a transformation
Transformation. Okay.
of some sort. Suddenly she has realized what's happening, she's accepted her role and that this is ordained by God, and she strides out of her tent into the middle of the battlefield at the death of her nephew, Ali al-Akbar, to lament his death. But she is described as looking like the rising sun as she comes out of her tent by Sunni authors. Because people say, who is this? They say, that's Lady Zaynab, that's Zaynab. So there's been a psychological shift, I think. And Lady Zaynab at that moment becomes the woman she was born to be.
And that's just the beginning
And
of
that's
her
the
troubles.
beginning. Well, troubles, yes, but she then emerges a further 2 times from her tent. One time to try and stop a little boy, we'll talk about him running off to fight,
Sure.
and she can't stop him, he's faster than she is. And then a second time to challenge the killers of her brother as they're killing him.
Challenge in what way?
She basically stands in front of them and says, is there not a single Muslim among you?
Sure.
And we're told that
Try to wake them up.
That Umar, who was the leader of the army, that he burst into tears and turned his face away. The only person who's not affected, of course, is Shimmer, but that's because Shimmer has a certain psychology himself, which is not going to be affected by the sorrow of a woman, I don't think.
Right.
Particularly.
Right.
But
Psychotic behavior,
oh,
maybe?
yeah, I think so.
Yeah?
I think, and he wasn't the only one. I think there are a few of them who and you don't say somebody's psychotic just because you don't like them. No, this is serious stuff.
Well, they were chosen for that particular
Yeah,
reason. I mean, a normal person would not be in that position. or
Shimmer
get given that position.
has to harangue the soldiers and threaten them to kill Hussein. None of the soldiers wanted to kill him. They surrounded him and none of them wanted to kill him. Shimmer is the one who basically threatens them, and then or whoever was the killer, and there's a dispute in the text as to who struck the death blow, but whoever it was who struck the death blow was himself couldn't have been damaged, but damaged. You
Damaged
couldn't
as well.
possibly kill a man who's already on the ground. Why not just take him prisoner? Why do you have to kill him? You don't have to kill him. No, it was Shimmer who had harangued right from the beginning that he should be killed.
What power did he have, though? Wasn't he just following the orders of Umar ibn Sa'd?
Well, no, because Shimmer eventually comes and takes over the army because the thought is that Umar is not doing the job properly. And so Yazid begins to panic, yes, in fact, Yazid. It's Yazid who begins to panic. Ziyad also, perhaps, that he's not forceful enough. And so Shimmer is sent to take over, and he takes over leadership, and he's the one.
Surely Yazid is panicking based on information well in advance, revealed to him well in advance, because there's no phones at that time.
No, this is more.
He's in Damascus.
Yeah,
Yazid.
They wanted Umar bin Sa'd, who was the leader of the army, to take speedy action, and he wasn't taking speedy action.
Right, so they were concerned about his
So because
position.
Karbala takes place over a series of days, it's
Right.
they arrive, they encamp, all of the stuff, fetching water and fighting and little skirmishes until the actual moment. It's a longish period.
Was
And
Umar ibn Sa'd still rewarded by Yazid at the end of all this?
I think he was, but I think he also died quite soon after that.
Okay.
I haven't kind of followed his career.
No worries, sorry, I digress. So
Yeah.
we were speaking about Lady Zaynab and how she's confronting
So she
these
confronts
hardened criminals.
the men who are actually killing her brother and challenges their Islamic faith. She doesn't challenge them on another level. She says, "Is there not a Muslim among you?" And that word for her, Muslim, contains everything that it should contain in terms of honesty, virtue, rationality.
The difference between somebody reciting the Shahada and not.
Yeah. She's not saying, "Are there religious people among you?" She's not saying
Muslim
that.
among you.
She says, "Is there not a Muslim among you?" In other words, using Muslim in the strongest possible way. And Lady Zaynab uses very interesting language. There are things that she says that you could interpret them quite radically and say, "Wow, what is she actually saying?" In the course of her attack against Yazid, her final protest, she basically says that the murder of Hussain is a more serious sin than shirk.
More serious than shirk. And shirk is the unforgivable.
And exactly, that's the point she's making, that even shirk
She's not wrong.
is not as bad as this. Now that's an extraordinary theological statement to make, that you're basically saying, if you think shirk is bad, this is far worse. I can't remember the exact line she uses, but she uses a line which quite clearly means this: you've done something worse than to add partners to God by killing al-Hussein.
You're speaking of an interaction between Sayyidah Zaynab and Yazid at this moment.
Yeah.
Now, I know this is one of the build-up. This was sort of the ending. We hear this in the pulpits, etc. If we backtrack a little bit, I know she's given other sermons in different cities as well.
Okay, so
is that correct?
So then she challenges the killers of Hussein. Al-Hussein is killed, and so this is almost certainly on Friday.
Okay.
The 10th is a Friday.
Sure.
In some texts, it's a Saturday. I think that's wrong. I think it's a Friday.
Sure.
Saturday, the bodies are buried.
Except?
Or maybe not. And the reason I say maybe not, eventually they are going to be buried, is because, well, it's difficult. The chronology gets difficult here. So let me backtrack.
Sure.
I think the bodies are, all of them, except for the heads, buried on the Saturday.
Okay.
And that the lament that Zainab sings about being half of my heart, that's not a lament. And her brother, she calls her brother half of my heart.
Sure.
That's not, as the commentators say, sung as they're leaving on the Sunday for Kufa. I think it's sung as the women are driven from the tents because they're threatening to burn them, and they see the bodies. Because if the bodies were buried on Saturday, which it seems they were, she couldn't have seen the body of her brother lying on the sand on the Sunday. So I suspect that lament about this was foretold, she says, if I knew that this was what was foretold, it's a real lament. I think it's on Friday, on the day of Ashura, as the women are driven from their tent because they're being threatened to be burnt down, the tents, and she sees the body of her brother and his companions. She sings this lament.
This term or these words you've just said to me, half of my heart. So this was a lament by Lady Zaynab, but I'm recalling earlier before we began, you told me in the canteen that that's the name of your book as well.
Yeah.
And that's where you got that from.
I got it from the lament because it's very moving. She's basically saying half of me has been killed on the field of Karbala.
What's the full title of your book?
The book about Zainab is called Half of My Heart, The Narratives of Zainab bint Ali.
And what angle are you coming in from? Is that a biography about Lady Zaynab?
It's a fragmentary biography and then a full description of what the Maqatil literature, including the Sunni, because many of the Maqatil books are Sunni books, say about her and her role at Karbala, that she does appear at Karbala. She doesn't stay in her tent. She comes out a few times. Once at least on the orders of Hussain to chase after this little nephew of hers who's trying to fight, but also on other occasions. And then she leads the survivors. On the Sunday, the survivors are taken back.
Where can these guys watching, listening, where can they get a copy of this book?
Probably from the publishers is the easiest and the cheapest.
What's the name of the publishers?
Georgius Press.
Georgius Press. So just go to their website.
Yeah, they're a superb publisher of Islamic, Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek texts. They publish texts, and they're based in New Jersey. And they published the book on Fatima, and I just stuck with them. I like the stuff they've produced. So
okay, so that would be really interesting. I haven't had an opportunity to read that, but I'll look to add that to my list and hopefully get that done as well.
Your bucket list,
my bucket list. Yeah. So yes, you're talking about this change, this lady of light rising like the phoenix at that particular moment in time.
Yeah.
And you were carrying on from that point onwards.
So that's the moment that Lady Zaynab is doing the thing she was born to do. I'm convinced of this. She was born for that day specifically, to stand by her brother.
Right.
And therefore to be an immemorial, inexpungible part of Karbala history. You cannot talk about Karbala ever and not mention the name Zainab. You can't. It's not acceptable. It's a bad angle of history to just make it about Al-Hussein and forget not only the 70 or so companions, but also specifically this sister who followed him, and then after the battle becomes the first preacher. She's the first person to basically do a majlis.
Right. I always find Sayyidah Zainab, the more I learn about her, and I'm even learning a bit more from you as well, I always feel that I got no other word but to say she almost has like these superhuman abilities, where we have Al-Hussein, Imam Hussain alayhi salam. He had to witness his family members, sons, companions, and what great companions they were, to die mercilessly at the hands of Yazid's army, bury them or take care of them as much, their corpus, bring them back. It was hot, humid, and he himself had to die, right? Devastating set of circumstances. Sayyidah Zainab did something very similar. So she too had great admiration for the companions of her brother. Yeah. And obviously these family members were her family members as well. She had to witness them being beheaded and killed mercilessly. But then Imam Hussein's mission sort of came complete when he himself was laid to rest and returned to his Lord. Bibi Zainab's began from that point onwards.
That was really exactly that as he... So this can also be quite a controversial issue, because when Al-Hussein dies, there is a new Imam. Of course,
exactly.
Zain al-Abidin.
Exactly.
So Zain al-Abidin is Imam He is ill.
How old is Imam Zainal?
I think he must have been early 20s. It's a dispute, but I follow Sheikh Al-Mufid. And Al-Mufid, I think, gets it right, that Ali al-Akbar, the oldest son, was about 29.
Okay.
Then you have Zain al-Abidin, who's Al-Wasit, he's the middle son.
Right.
And he's about 21. And then you have the baby, who is killed in his father's arms. So that's, but not all the texts agree on that. But
There's gaps. We can understand that. Yeah.
I don't think that Zain al-Abidin was 12 years old or 10 years old at that stage. It doesn't make sense. His birth dates are given. We know his birth dates, and he couldn't have been that. But even at 21, he's too ill even to get out of his bed at that stage. That's the reason he doesn't. One of the reasons why he doesn't fight. Not the only reason.
Do we know the type of illness that he was suffering?
No, we don't.
We just know he was ill,
We just know that he was
bedridden,
ill, and
couldn't
that-
get up.
And I think maybe divinely ordained, because you have
Yeah.
to preserve the life of the Imam. So he's
These hardened criminals didn't let a 6-month-old baby or an infant child go.
Yeah.
What's a 21, 22-year-old man?
Curiously, his life was saved the first time not by Lady Zaynab, but by one of the soldiers. When Shimmer was threatening to kill this child, he said, "Oh, come on, you wouldn't kill a child, would you?" So, the tradition is that Lady Zaynab saves his life. Yes, she does, but much later on, in the court of Ziyad. But on the battlefield, when Shimmer is threatening to kill this child, one of his own soldiers, the same one who's going to carry the head of Al-Hussain, says, "No, you wouldn't do that, would you? Come on, just leave him." And so the imamate is saved by the intervention of this soldier, and then saved a second time by the intervention of... Now, people could say, "Oh, no, it's God who preserves..." Yes, he does, but God uses people to do the things that need to be done. And he uses this soldier, and then he uses Lady Zaynab to preserve the life of Imam
Zain al-Abidin.
Zain al-Abidin. And I think that there's a particular moment when in the court of Ziyad, Zain al-Abidin turns to her and says, "Be quiet now, let me speak."
Oh.
That's the moment when he takes over.
Imam then just kind
He's,
of takes
he's
over.
He's Imam. That's not the question. The question is, when does he begin to function as leader of the Ahlul Bayt? And I think he begins at the moment where he invites her to step back into history because she's done what she was meant to do. She doesn't disappear, but she does quietly fade into the distance. And he takes over as Imam.
Amongst the Ahlul Bayt, the members of the Ahlul Bayt themselves, they are, I believe, my opinion here, indebted to Sayyidah Zainab.
Absolutely.
For how she carried herself and carried Imama, carried the entire camp of Imam Hussain, what was left of it, and going through those hard, harsh conditions. I believe they went to Kufa first. So the Shahada takes place. She's martyred, Imam al-Hussain. Bibi Zainab, as you said, she rose from the phoenix around that time. She's now leading. The night begins to fall, and the army men storm the camps, right? What is Sayyidah Zainab doing at this time? She is now the leader. She knows she has an imam who she has to preserve, and she has to also help the kids, the children, the other women. Everybody's frantic. It's I cannot fathom, nor do I want to.
No. She takes on a matriarchal role, I think. I think she gathers people and pulls them together. And you mentioned a point earlier which is for me vital, although it's difficult to talk about, that both Lady Zaynab, certainly Al-Hussain, although Al-Hussain is an imam, so let's put him aside because an imam has a whole lot
divinely,
of but Lady Zaynab is not an imam. And yet she has this superhuman courage at that moment. We have to agree that this is a gift from God.
Absolutely.
That she's not just naturally brave. Very few people are naturally brave. We're naturally brave when we're far from danger. But when we're close to danger, we're inclined to become a little more cowardly.
Sure.
Even the most pious people, the moment of death is a terrifying moment for anybody, believe or not, because it's the unknown. So I don't believe that she's just happens to be a brave lady who's there in the right. No. I think she's ordained to be there, she's born to be there, and she is gifted with all the necessary virtues to do the thing she did, which is gather the survivors, keep them together, encourage the little ones, especially the little girls who must have been, you can't imagine a girl in the middle of a battlefield.
Nor do I want to.
And then this horrific journey however long it took from Karbala to Kufa, and then after ill treatment there, Kufa to Damascus.
Could you tell me a little bit about the women that she obviously was gathering, of the camp, the women of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, his family, who were the survivors? I don't want to take anything away from them as well. I know Lady Zaynab was the leader of the time, of that time, but for example, there's Kulthum. There's other, like the wives.
It's Fatima, daughter of Zainab.
Sure. Tell me a little bit about them. What was their state of mind? Well, you don't need to tell me their state of mind, but how did they help their auntie Zainab, for example? How did they help the Lady Zaynab?
It's a curious thing, because Karbala is not a battle in the traditional sense with two armies going against each other. Karbala is a massively, overwhelmingly superior in terms of numbers army of the Khalifa of Yazid, and then this group of 70 or 71.
How many from Yazid's side, from your understanding?
Oh, the number goes up to 30,000 or more, depending on who you're reading. It was a huge force, because Yazid was determined to deal with this issue, or at least he was determined that other people would deal it for him.
Sure.
He wasn't going to. It wasn't that the army of Al-Hussein, for what can be called an army, went out. They went out one by one. That's terrifying. So the ladies and the women and the children in the tents were watching them getting killed one by one. One child, like at least two of the sons of Al-Hassan, go out and stand in front of the army and shout insults at them about who they are. I am the son of Hassan, or Al-Hussein is my Amir, and I'm not going to be separated from him. So this can't be just normal human bravery, because you're dealing with a fairly young generation here.
Yeah.
And
their upbringing must have been amazing.
Well, they're very different, of course, from later generations. All of them grow up in the household of the Prophet. That's already one thing. But still, they must have been given supernatural strength at that moment to do. It's not.
Must have.
I can't believe anything else.
I believe that as well.
Yeah.
So Lady Zaynab gets a hold of all the survivors. They now need to move forward. They go to Kufa first, I believe.
Well, they don't go. They're dragged to Kufa. Oh. So they're dumped on camels, and they're dumped. The women are, in some texts, the women are bareheaded, and to shame them. But I mean, we don't know how long the journey is. It's very hard, because there are two journeys. There are the journey of the heads, which is a separate journey at times, and then there's the journey of the survivors. And I think in some texts the heads arrive first and then the survivors, and in other texts the survivors arrive and then the heads.
So that was a different sort of set of horses, for example, that were carrying the heads, and they just went forward.
And there's a whole story about the heads, which is in itself fascinating.
Sure.
So these women and children are taken by the enemy army, by enemy soldiers, escorted by enemy soldiers, quite possibly bareheaded, quite possibly in very rough conditions, from Karbala to the court of Ziyad. Now, I have, again, a theory about Ziyad, and people disagree with me. I think Ziyad was far more psychotic than Yazid. I think Ziyad was genuinely psychotic.
When you say psychotic, I need to pause here for a second, because it makes me think that I think of Day of Judgment, I think of people with disabilities, because they obviously, this is my understanding, that somebody who has the intellect, who knows the right from wrong, will be judged accordingly. They'll be held accountable for whatever good, bad, ugly they've done in their life, and then therefore the results would be provided. Here's the results of your exam. You may go this way, heaven. You may go
that way.
Exactly. When you say psychotic, it makes me think there's mental disorders there. There's a handicap there. There's a disabilities there. It's almost as if they're not going to be held accountable, but surely that's not the case, because these individuals knew what they were getting themselves into.
Just on the basis of the encounter between Ziyad and Lady Zaynab, and then Ziyad shortly afterwards with Zain al-Abidin. It's very interesting that when they enter the Kufa court of Ziyad, he goes for Zaynab first, and then I must get this right. He notices Zainab, who comes in and sits down, and he says 3 times, "Who's that sitting woman?" So
Yazid says this.
Ziyad.
Ziyad says this. Okay.
So she comes into the court, and what I'm trying to say is that as far as I remember, in the court of Ziyad, he tackles Zainab first, then Zain al-Abidin. In the court of Yazid, he goes for Zain al-Abidin first, then he notices Zainab. So the roles are reversed. But in the court of Ziyad, the survivors are brought in. Lady Zaynab is dressed in a very shabby clothing, but she's got some servants with her, and she goes and sits down, and that really irritates Yazid. He's immediately annoyed, and 3 times he uses a phrase in Arabic to say, "Who is that seated woman, the sitting one?" And he doesn't ask her, "Who are you?" He asks others, "Who is she?" And so you could interpret and say, well, yes, was he annoyed because she sat down without his permission, or did something about her personality?
Right. She must have an aura around her.
Something interesting.
Noor, light.
Then finally a maid stands up and says, "This is Zainab, daughter of Fatima." Not Ali. Fatima. And why does she say that? I'm convinced she says that in a sense because already there is huge devotion to Lady Fatima, and she wants Ziyad to know who he's messing with. You're messing with the daughter of Fatima. Just be very careful. I'm convinced that it's because of that already the name of Fatima is well known, and this is one of her children. And there's this encounter in which Ziyad changes from fierce anger to suddenly praising her. "You're such a brave woman." He's just, there's something wrong with him.
After taking out her family members.
Yeah. At one moment he wants to kill her. The text says he begins to have bad thoughts about her because she challenges him. Famously, he says, "What do you see?" He says, "What do you see now?"
Sorry, was this Yazid who asked this?
This is Yazid.
This is Yazid, yes? I just want to make sure that we're not about... Because I keep mixing the two psychotic people.
No, this is Ziyad. We're not at Yazid yet. Yazid is at the end.
So Ziyad asks...
As far as I remember, Ziyad asks her...
I thought it was Yazid. I mean, I've listened... I mean, again, I'm not telling you. I'm just saying this is what I thought. It was Yazid who asked that.
I think it's Ziyad.
In his palace or courtyard. Okay.
He begins by saying, "Alhamdulillah." He says, "Praise be to God that we have killed the tyrant, that we have done all this." Then he says, "How do you see what God has done to your Ahl Bayt?"
Go on, say those famous lines.
And then she says this famous line, "I see nothing but beauty."
How does one even prepare to say that? I mean, what you would have to go through.
Yeah.
And what amazing.
She's an extraordinary character.
Amazing.
Yeah. But she has a theological depth to her. She knows theology. She knows what things. And she's come to the full understanding, I think, on the eve of Karbala, this is it. And blossoms at that moment. And that's why she can go and preach the message of her brother immediately. She can justify what he's done. She's the first one to justify standing. So that's not even the first encounter, because when they arrive in Kufa, she preaches this. It's not a sermon. It's called the khutbah, but it's not. It's an ihtijaj. It's a protest.
Okay.
Against the people of Kufa who've let them down. So they haven't even got to Yazid's court yet.
Right.
And she challenges them, "You people of Kufa." And it's just terrifying what she says to them.
Yeah.
Not quite as terrifying as what she's about to say to Yazid when they finally get to him, but she attacks the people of Kufa. Then they get taken into Ziyad's, I must say Ibn Ziyad, by the way. It's not Ziyad, it's Ibn Ziyad. It's quite important because he is Ibn Ziyad. He's not Ziyad, he's Ibn Ziyad. And I got challenged by a sheikh who said, "Come on, you've got to say Ibn Ziyad." So it's quite right. So it's Ibn Ziyad. So then, having harangued the people of Kufa, and Zain al-Abidin also speaks to them, and I think Sukaina also gets up and challenges them. I think there are a couple of because they all gather around this caravan that's arrived, and they get
so they're admonishing the people of Kufa for what they've done.
They let
the Hussain down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then they appear in the court of Ibn Ziyad, and Ibn Ziyad has in front of him the heads of some of the survivors, maybe not all of them, of the killed, the murdered, maybe not all the heads, but certainly Al-Hussein's head, which he is mocking in his court. Some of his own soldiers challenge him and say, "Hey, you shouldn't do that. These, the lips that you're poking with your stick were lips that were kissed by the Prophet. You don't want to be doing that." And he orders their execution. He's constantly having people executed who challenge him. In walks Lady Zaynab, sits down, and he challenges her, and she challenges him back.
Right.
He then thinks to kill her, and a soldier of his intervenes and says, "She's just a woman. Don't.
So someone who had a soft spot for Sayyida Zainab and the family of the Prophet, even though he was from the other camp.
Then he suddenly praises her and he says, "You're brave. You're like Ali. He was also brave. He was also." So then he notices Zainal Abidin.
Sure.
And there's this moving conversation because he has him strip search basically to see if he's a man or not.
Right.
Get what I was saying? In other words, he according to some of the Makatil, he says, is he even a man?
So he's trying to humiliate.
So he's
the
humiliates
Imam.
him by
Yeah, he can try all he wants,
having him
obviously,
stripped, and they say, yes, of course he's a man. He said, well, have him killed. And then Lady Zaynab throws herself over him and says, haven't you killed enough of our family? And then Ziyad praises her and says, you see how beautiful is this kinship? This is not a normal human
This is
being.
not. No, something's definitely wrong with him. Absolutely, something's definitely wrong with that guy, and he's going to get it very soon. So, what is it that Sayyidah Zainab said to Yazid? Because you said that's something even more.
Okay, so then the journey continues to the court of Yazid.
Sure.
And there's this very profound conversation between Yazid. Yazid, I think, without minimalizing his guilt, I think that Yazid understands he's done something wrong, seriously wrong.
Well, he should, because he's going to have to pay for the consequences.
Ziyad doesn't. But Yazid, I think he realizes, because he treats the survivors better than Ibn Ziyad does.
Okay.
Ibn Ziyad, for example, exposes the children to these heads. Yazid tries to hide the children behind him so they don't see it.
Okay.
I think he's backpedaling fast because I think he's realized what he's done. It doesn't diminish his guilt, but he treats them in a slightly more gentle way than does Ibn Ziyad. And he says to Zainal Abidin, what's your name? Who are you? And he says, Ali. And he says, no, you're not Ali. I mean, all of Al-Hussein's sons were Ali. Because you weren't allowed to mention Ali's name. So he called all of his sons Ali as against the ruling dynasty, to say, my sons are all called Ali.
Right.
And so he says, I'm Ali. And Yazid says to him, no, you're not. God killed Ali.
God killed Ali. Okay.
And then Zainab says, no, I had a brother also, Ali, but it wasn't God who killed him, it was you. You people killed him. It's a very moving moment. I had a brother who was also Ali.
He can try and backpedal all he wants, Yazid,
Yeah.
but if you, and let me know if you've come across this, after Karbala, after this event that we're relaying back, a few years after, he actually goes and tries to, or perhaps successfully destroys the Kaaba.
He certainly gave orders, as I remember, to try and destroy any tomb of Al-Hussein, because a number of men are sent to dig around it so that water flows over it and it disappears.
Right.
Yazid only survived 2 or 3 years after Hussein. He himself died quite soon after.
Did he not order some sort of conquest into Mecca because his authority was being questioned?
It might have been, although it's odd because Mecca was not a stronghold of resistance and rebellion. It was Kufa that was really the city that had rebelled. But it could well be. He was a drunkard. He was a gambler. We know this. Even the Sunni texts admit he used to race horses, not horses, dogs. Dog racing was his big thing.
What's his thing about monkeys? I've heard something about monkeys.
I don't
know. No, okay, let's stay away from that stuff.
I do know that his gambling took the form of dog racing, because it's in the text that he used to gamble by racing dogs. He used to drink, and the drinking comes out quite strongly in the story of the heads as they're transported.
Sure. What I'm trying to get at is there anywhere recorded that Yazid categorically apologized?
No, absolutely not.
Or perhaps to God even? Nothing, right? And then his actions many months, years after, I don't know when it happened, going and trying to destroy the house of God. On top of that, so first the family of the Prophet, house of God, so it's just one evil mess versus goodness, righteousness, etc., etc.
His wife has a terrible dream about Al-Hussein, and she goes looking for him, and he's her husband Yazid, and he's lying in a dark room with his face to the wall. And she says, I've had a dream about Al-Hussein. And he says, I've got nothing to do with Al-Hussein. I think he understands. He's not going to apologize. He's not going to admit wrong. I think he understands, unlike Ibn Ziyad, that he has done something terrible. And I think he tries to distance us. He blames Ibn Ziyad. He says, Ibn Ziyad, he's the one who's done this. He tries to absolve himself of guilt. He proclaims that Ibn Ziyad is mad. He calls him by a terrible insult, the son of an immoral woman, because he's trying to shift the blame.
Probably
He probably was. He also becomes quite fixated with Zain al-Abidin. At one stage, he won't eat a meal unless Zain al-Abidin is present.
Oh, very odd, strange behavior.
Yeah.
But when you know you've done the abominable, the thing that you're not supposed to be ever doing, caught doing, etc.
Yeah.
Let's finish off on Sayyidah Zainab's topic by. Could you tell me where she's buried? Because
No,
I think
can't.
this. Oh, see, I knew you were going to do that.
Of course I can't. Nobody can. Look, there are three possibilities, two of which are stronger. So some people think that she might be buried in Medina or Mecca. No, that's unlikely. It's unlikely.
Okay, so
that's
that is one angle,
Yeah, take
but
that
that's
one.
unlikely according to your research.
So
Okay.
the most popular answer is, of course, near Damascus, in and around Damascus.
Her current shrine.
Yeah,
Yes,
well,
around
one of her current shrines, because there's also a shrine in Cairo.
That's what I've heard, and I wanted to see if you were going to say something about that as well.
All I want to say is that there's some good arguments for Egypt.
Good arguments for Egypt.
Yeah.
Why was she in Egypt?
Well, that's the thing. It seems as though she was exiled there because she was causing trouble. Well, she was
With her sermons and with her lectures.
Exactly. And she was well received in Egypt. She was given a place to live. The governor of Egypt received her quite well, looked after her. There she, I think, grew ill. Some people say she had an accident, died. I'm not so sure about that. I think that she just, like Lady Fatima years before, she just grew tired and ill. She would have been in her early 60s or her late 50s.
But that makes sense, though, when it comes to, say, the Zainab.
Yeah.
Look at her age, but
Yeah.
Lady Fatima,
Yeah.
19-ish,
Yeah.
already a strong, abled woman, for example.
But no matter how divinely gifted Lady Zaynab was in the moment, there has to be some post-traumatic stress. There has to be, of looking back and realizing
She's a
what
human
you've
at the
seen.
end of the day.
She's a human. She's a mother and a wife, and so it looks as though she ended her days about a year after Karbala. She dies.
So from your examination, you feel it's a 50-50 draw between Cairo
I'm
and
so
Damascus?
nervous now, and I don't want to say percentages. Because I know that Damascus is the popular option, and I know the shrine there is. I've got pictures of it. It's beautiful.
Have you? So you haven't been?
I haven't been, not yet. Bucket list again.
Bucket list, sure.
But there are a number of very early Sunni texts of mostly mystical Sufi texts of Sufis who insist that every day they went to pray at the shrine of Lady Zaynab. And one of them says, this Lady Zaynab is the sister of Al-Hussain and the daughter of Ali. It's not some other Zaynab I'm talking about. He's quite determined that it's Cairo. And I've met a number of people who are quite open to the possibility. The point being, it doesn't actually matter in the end. I mean, I come from a tradition where visiting shrines and tombs is quite important, but in the end, it's the presence of Lady Zaynab as a universal model that is more important as to whether I can find exactly where she's buried, I think.
I'm going to put you on the spot here, Father Christopher. In a line, give me from all your examinations of history books, scriptures, etc. Give me a line of Sayyidah Zainab, how you feel about Sayyidah Zainab. And you just said a couple of words there. You're not allowed to use them. What was it? Universal model. You can't use that now. You have to use some new ones.
Well, I would say exactly the same. I think that in a sense Hussain and Lady Zaynab are almost twinned in this, that the virtue that dominates her life is the virtue of integrity. That's the virtue.
Sure.
If you are a person of integrity, all the other virtues have to be there, of course, because you're a person of integrity. And I think that Lady Zaynab was a woman who did what she said. She knew what she believed, she said what she believed, and she did what she believed. And now that's a simple way of describing a very complex life, but I think that she's that primarily. She is a believing woman who is convinced of the truth, and nothing will stop her from being part of that story, but also of speaking the truth, not truths, political or religious, the truth to the enemies of her brother and to anyone who will listen to her. I think integrity It's one of the big things missing from the world. In religion, in politics, in social life, lack of integrity.
Father Christopher Clohessy. First of all, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Perfect.
I practiced.
You practiced.
So I'm glad I did it.
Nothing
Yeah.
like Google phonetics.
Yeah. This has been really enlightening, as I predicted it would be. There's a lot more that I'm going to still be asking you. There's plenty of other stuff.
Great.
I hope you're not running away. I hope you're not getting tired from my questions.
No, not at all. I'm just warming up.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying this.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
It's a great pleasure.